silly video about well, here's the history. During the 1990s, Hillary Clinton led the drive to get gun locks put on firearms. In the year 2000, Smith and Wesson voluntarily, quote unquote, jumped on board for President Bill Clinton's proposed legislation that enforced safety and design standards and changes. Most of these aren't even really used anymore, but anyway, these restrictions on gun magazine sizes, limits on the sales and distribution of firearms, for instance, background checks and stuff, and locking devices. So federal, state, and city laws against Smith and Wesson lawsuits against Smith and Wesson would be dropped. This was a deal to get rid of the lawsuits and institute a change that people wanted done for whatever reason. The NRA almost immediately instigated a boycott of Smith and Wesson and any other company that did the same thing. And people actually did this. They treated it as some sort of traitorous behavior. Saf-T-Hammer, a company that makes the kind of lock they needed, bought them out for $45 million with the intent of incorporating its security products into all Smith & Wesson goods, which is the main reason that they are on there. The new company was made Smith & Wesson Holding Company. The thing is that people refer to this little lock on it that you can easily just take out of the gun by taking it apart. It's sort of like the orange tip on a toy gun. You can just paint it over or remove it if you're using it as a prop in a movie, but it has to be there for international sales. It doesn't actually have to be there if you're just selling it in town in the United States. Most people don't know that. But anyway, people decided to call this, in an absolutely stupefying case of just finding something to lie about, calling it the Hillary hole, mostly as a double entendre style joke, as a way to annoy people, and very, very much importantly, to ignore the fact that this was a deal to prevent lawsuits from being allowed by various mayors trying to sue the companies that made guns for what people did with them. Mostly because of a very simple idea. Many gun manufacturers in the 90s were marketing their guns in an irresponsible way, depicting themselves as do-it-yourself Dirty Harry kids, exploiting and playing to and doing fan service for fantasies that people had about guns. And I'm not joking about that. They would present them as an example of being macho, aka we make fun of you for having a tiny penis for having that gun, and putting it under all sorts of different marketing standards and ideas. Some guns were sold for being technically interesting, something that might appeal to me, but most of the time it was sold as using fear-mongering. And I'm going to point out something in this very short video. The reason the expression assault rifle, which is a real term now, and assault weapon, which is a BS term, exists is because those were marketing terms used by the gun industries. One of them, the assault rifle, or assault weapon, excuse me, because it's vague, was used to refer to a under-frame rocket or grenade launcher, or actually tear gas launcher, but they would depict it as being an assault weapon. They were literally doing the macho bullshit thing. That's where the term came from. It wasn't invented to demonize anything. It was used as a marketing term. And the term we consider mostly an appropriate term, assault rifle, because it has that weird niche in the military as a weapon that's used for attack and being useful in modern warfare, was also a marketing term that was used by the gun industry. The gun industry has done a bunch of things to shoot themselves in the foot. And in this case, this was a company realizing we're going to be sued by dozens and dozens of individuals wasting money and time, and they might set a precedent for us selling something that someone else used badly. This is literally like me selling bows and arrows and someone actually killing somebody with them and me getting sued for it. It doesn't make any sense to do these things. But what they did was, at the time, expedient. And what did the NRA tell everybody to do? Destroy the company? because they did something to make it to where they wouldn't suffer through a bunch of lawsuits. And all it meant was, all you had to do when you bought the gun is stick the key in literally once, turn it, and not put it back in again. And no, you will not find a really consistent, real reports of people saying that the thing self-locked. That doesn't happen. And if you're worried about that, anybody, even then, just shut up and admit it, could just look up how to, this is the year 2000. It was the internet. Everybody learned how to take the thing apart very minimally and remove the parts so that the lock didn't do anything anymore. You could still sit there and turn the key. It would still show that it had the key lock in it, but it didn't move any part into position that would do anything. Some people even went to the trouble of taking off the part of it, which is usually a protrusion, and just chopping it off with a hacksaw and putting the part back in. The lock would still function, it just wouldn't affect whether you could fire the gun. Or you could just take out all the parts and just fill in the hole and paint it. But people didn't tell people to do that. It didn't actually change the price of some of the guns at all. What they did is they told them, they're traitors, attack them. The NRA is all about grandstanding and shitting on people, looking for an enemy to demonize, and telling you not to look behind the curtain. This is an extremely good example of this, and it is shining brightly like a strobe light in your face, inducing a convulsion, by calling this compromise to avoid millions of dollars worth of lawsuits and potentially creating an actual, real, in-court precedent that would affect your rights. Their way of getting around it is people call it the Hillary hole, on purpose, because Hillary Clinton literally did not cause this necessarily. This was done by everybody panicking because of something, or freaking out about something, or just getting angry and wanting to attack them. Suing cigarette manufacturers for intentionally lying to you about how safe a cigarette is not the same as suing gun companies for selling something to you that literally says it's for killing people and for self-defense to prevent death. And calling it a Hillary hole is a multi-layered example of not admitting that there is a very bad undercurrent in the gun industry and gun community, if you want to call it that, of finding someone to demonize so that everyone falls in line. Everybody knows that if you are a gun company, if you don't do what the NRA wants, they'll destroy you. Because they did. Now I want you to think about that. Does that sound like a group of people you want to depend on and fund? You know what? The NRA sounds a lot like the Church of Scientology when they want to do fair game on you. You might want to really consider how fucked up this is. Oh no, this was a grassroots thing. No, it fucking wasn't. The company, specifically Smith Wesson, had two options. Hopefully not go to court and not set a precedent, and just cave in and agree. Some companies did, some companies didn't. You can buy a gun now, even from that company, that doesn't have a lock on it. And again, you could disable it. And people treated it as some sort of symbolic thing. If you give an inch, you give them a mile. So you destroy me for making sure that a court case doesn't set a precedent and force everybody to go through it. Several companies did not sign on for this. They went after Smith & Wesson specifically for some reason. I'm sure there's a real good reason. You can look it up. And several other companies, I'm sure. Some companies like Cobra, Leonette, every other name they've changed to, have been attacked in a very similar way. There are certain shotgun companies that were attacked at one point. In fact, companies that make only self-defense weapons have sometimes been targeted by politicians until they acknowledged it was for self-defense and we don't want people to defend themselves, and then everything blew up in their face. I'd actually really like to be curious about the history of this, but all I find are people not wanting to explain why you're calling them something associated with Hillary Clinton. It was specifically a key locking system that was asked for effectively, or became a thing they picked up from Bill Clinton and his administration. But let's blame Hillary. Yeah, she advocated for this stuff. If you look up what she actually advocated, it wasn't this. And again, this was something you could just leave unlocked. And no, it didn't relock itself in any rate that anyone could show could work. This is an example of, were you able to make it do it? Yes. How many times? Once. How long have you had it? The day I got it. So you didn't just try it again and see if it was just that you didn't set the lock correctly? It's a goofy design. It's a dumb design. And again, you could just take it apart and pull out the parts. There was no law against defeating the functions of it. And if you're not aware of it, it was to prevent people from stealing the gun when you had it stored. They just wanted to make sure there was a lock integrated, so you had to be forced to have a lock of some kind. The other option, and this is a joke that someone said, is to deliberately make it to where you could disengage the firing pin on some guns or just put in a short one so they could never fire. That's actually a trope in some movie. The point I'm making here is, at no time during any of this mess did anybody stick with facts. Now I'm going to provide a bunch of links. You can choose to read them. And that's okay. But why would you trust the judgment of people who can't even get their facts right? Now, I'm not perfect. I could have this totally wrong. Post below how I'm wrong. But make sure you don't do the deliberate, I'm going to trigger people while I do this. Don't do that. Don't be an SJW in reverse, please. Anyway, if anybody's curious about it, yes, the NRA punished a corporation for not obeying them. That's all that happened. And made everybody hate them and screw them over and practically run them completely out of business. And this is the group of people you think giving money to is good. That's a destructive cult, and you're an idiot for doing so. I'm sorry, I just think that. I will never give them any money until they cease and desist doing this toxic stuff. Good day.